Don, you make the extraordinary claim that consciousness is fundamental.
Yes.
And if I give you that,
Right.
how do you then make the next leap to say that consciousness is causative of the physical world, such that things that we think are so fundamental, like not just mass energy, but space and time, are derivative, the contents of consciousness?
That's right. So the idea is that part of the structure of consciousness are the conscious experiences of the conscious entities, the conscious agents.
It seems simple.
And what we call the physical world is simply the contents of the experiences of conscious agents. So and different, going biological, different organisms, different species will have different structures to their nature of awareness, to the kinds of conscious experiences they have. In that sense, they'll be living in fundamentally different universes.
Well, that's just because their perception,
Their
though,
perceptions are different.
of the reality, if the reality is an independent reality,
Right.
different organisms have different perceptions of what that reality is. That's nothing surprising.
That's right. My assumption is that the fundamental reality is just consciousness. So that when we have different, for example, spaces and times, maybe one organism has 10 dimensions of color perception, another one has 4, we have 3. Those are just going to be features of their space. Maybe some organisms see in 4 dimensions, who knows, or 2 dimensions. So the deeper structures of their quote-unquote physical worlds could be quite different from ours.
Well, that could be just their interpretation or how they see the same physical world that's out there and as an independent entity.
That's right. If your assumption is that the real physical world is a 3D of space and 1 dimension of time, then that would have to be the interpretation that you would give to the different perceptions. But I'm suggesting that consciousness is fundamental, and so that any perception of space and time is nothing but the contents of consciousness. Now, the burden is on me, of course, to make that mathematically precise.
You have a lot of burdens.
I've got, that's right. And I'm cashing out some of the burdens. So I can have a model of consciousness that's precise and a dynamics that does allow me to derive certain aspects of quantum mechanics completely. The wave equation of the free particle and things like that. But there's more to do.
I would think that's the understatement of the year.
Right.
Now, what you have done in giving some experimental justification to your extraordinary claim that consciousness is fundamental,
Yes.
you have some interesting data in terms of the evolutionary fitness driving perceptions of reality to extinction. I mean, these are interesting ideas that you've come up with. But at the very maximum, that would seem to give you consciousness as a fundamental factor, but it would not, by the same fact, ipso facto, as we say, by the same fact, it would not wipe out the reality of the rest of the world, but it would allow you just to bring consciousness down to the same level of existential of fundamentalism. But not to wipe out the other side.
The physicalist side.
Yeah, you are taking the additional step. You're creating a new miracle by not only making consciousness fundamental, but wiping out all the physical world at the same time, with no justification.
Right. So I take consciousness as fundamental, and I say that the physical world is not fundamental.
Right, and I'm saying that your data, what you're basing it on scientifically, you can say whatever you want.
Sure.
But I'm saying, we're a free country, you
Right,
can say
right,
whatever you
right.
want.
Yeah.
But in terms of what your data has shown,
Right.
I mean, I can see how consciousness might be, in your interpretation, fundamental. But
Right.
that does not give you the right to say that everything else doesn't exist. It just gives you more fundamental things.
I absolutely agree with you. So I could choose to be a dualist, for example. I could say I've got this mathematical theory of consciousness and it's quite rigorous and it's fundamental, and I also accept that there is a real objective physical world. Space and time at the Planck scale is fundamental as well, and
Right.
I could go there.
And you don't have to be a dualist to do that. You could just say that instead of 4 fundamental forces in the universe, there are 5, or I don't know, maybe 6. Maybe you need 2 for consciousness. In other words, you could have just consciousness being another fundamental element in the universe, not necessarily dualistic. I mean, if we have 4 fundamental fundamental principles in
Hmm.
the physical world, electromagnetism, gravity, strong and
Right,
weak force of the
right.
nucleus. I mean, that's not, we're not, you know, a fourfold. That's not a dualistic or a tripleistic or a fourpolistic approach to
Oh,
life.
oh, absolutely.
That's a physical world. Now, maybe conscious, just another one there.
And there are people like Nick Herbert, the quantum physicist Nick Herbert, who's proposed exactly that you know, fundamental particles also have you know, a unit like of charge, but also of consciousness.
Yeah, that's sort of a proto-consciousness kind of a
Exactly right.
panpsychist kind of view.
And
Eh,
it's now, I wouldn't want to discourage anybody from trying to pursue that. So as scientists, we all have to sort of, and I agree. At this point, there's nothing that tells me what I have to do. So it's a matter of taste. And the issue is, I like a monistic theory. I like the idea that consciousness is fundamental. And if I can only start with one definition of a conscious agent, and I can give you all of quantum field theory from that, that's pretty, from a scientific point of view, that has the kind of elegance that we're looking for. One hypothesis, and then everything flows from that. Now, I haven't done it yet. I've got some of it, but not all of it.
But to be fair, in terms of your own data, you have brought consciousness down to a fundamental level,
Right.
but you have done nothing to invalidate the existential reality of the physical world, other than your desire to be monistic as you define monism.
Well, I would say that it's consistent.
You don't agree with that?
No, I would say that it's consistent with what we know about, for example, results in quantum mechanics. That it's a consistent interpretation of quantum mechanics, you know, apart from my theory, that the physical world and its properties don't exist apart from their perceptions. So you can actually, I mean, the justification I'm talking about here is not a proof, but it is a justification that says there is this very, very strong body of evidence from quantum mechanics that very bright practitioners within the field of quantum mechanics, not all, but many bright ones, have interpreted as saying that the physical world only exists, its properties, space, time, position, momentum, only exist in the act of observation. So it's the physicists themselves, not all of them, by no means. The decoherence physicists take a different point of view. But the quantum Bayesian physicists, for example, are quite happy to say that it's basically the act of observation that creates all the physical properties. That probabilities only exist, and the wave function itself is only in the mind of the observer. It's not an objective property of the universe.
So you take that, you combine it with
That's right.
your independent data that brings consciousness to a fundamental level to at least begin to justify your monistic view.
That's right.
That consciousness is the totality of the reality, and that the physical world is the contents of consciousness. Is that fair?
That's absolutely right. I would lean heavily, for example, on the quantum Bayesian approach to quantum mechanics to suggest that we don't need to take physics as fundamental, and then the mathematics of consciousness to suggest that maybe we can take consciousness as fundamental.